Hello. If you enjoyed the story, leave your comment, give it a like and subscribe. Thank you very much. God bless you. I never thought I'd be the type of woman to come home early from a business trip. But there I was, standing in my own driveway at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, 3 days ahead of schedule. The Chicago conference had been a disaster. Cancelled presentations, food poisoning, and a general sense that the universe was telling me to go home. My husband Mark had been so supportive when I called, encouraging me to just come back whenever you feel ready. His voice had that warm, understanding tone that made me fall in love with him 12 years ago. The house looked peaceful from the outside. Our two-story colonial sat quietly under the streetlight, with just the living room window glowing softly. I smiled, imagining Mark probably fell asleep watching one of his documentaries again. Sarah, our babysitter, had texted me earlier that the kids were angels. Emma, 8, and Jake, 6, had gone to bed without any fuss. Sarah was a godsend, really. A 19-year-old college student who lived just 2 blocks away, she'd been watching our children for almost a year now. The kids adored her and Mark and I trusted her completely. I grabbed my suitcase from the trunk, my heels clicking against the concrete as I approached our front door. The key turned silently. Mark had finally fixed that squeaky lock I'd been complaining about. As I stepped inside, I could hear the faint sound of the television from the living room. The familiar scent of our home wrapped around me like a warm embrace. A mixture of the vanilla candles I loved and that subtle smell of childhood that seems to permeate every house with young kids. I set my suitcase down gently, not wanting to wake anyone. The hallway was dimly lit by the small lamp we always left on, casting long shadows across the hardwood floors. I could see the edge of our sectional couch from where I stood, and I could make out what looked like Mark's form stretched across it. Poor guy, I thought. He probably waited up for me and dozed off. But as I moved closer, my heart began to race. Something wasn't quite right about the scene unfolding before me. What I saw next will be burned into my memory forever. There on our family couch, the same couch where we'd spent countless Sunday mornings with the kids, where we'd watched movies and shared popcorn, where I'd nursed both babies during those exhausting early months, my husband Mark was lying with Sarah, our babysitter. They weren't just sleeping. They were intertwined in a way that made my stomach drop to the floor. Mark's arm was wrapped around Sarah's waist, her head resting on his chest. Her long blonde hair was spread across his shirt, and one of her legs was draped over his. The television was playing some late-night talk show, but the volume was so low it was barely audible. The scene looked intimate, peaceful even, which somehow made it worse. This wasn't a moment of passion caught in the act. This was comfortable, familiar, like they'd done this many times before. My first instinct was to scream, to demand answers, to wake up the entire neighborhood with my rage. But something held me back. Maybe it was shock, maybe it was the fear of waking the children upstairs, or maybe it was some deeper instinct telling me that this situation was more complex than it appeared. Instead, I stood there in the doorway, my hand gripping my purse so tightly my knuckles had turned white. I watched them for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Mark's chest rose and fell in the steady rhythm of deep sleep. Sarah looked so young, so innocent lying there. She was wearing one of my old college t-shirts, a faded blue NYU shirt that I'd given her months ago when she'd spilled juice on her clothes during a particularly chaotic evening with the kids. Seeing her in my shirt, in my husband's arms, felt like a violation I couldn't quite articulate. The rational part of my brain started cataloging evidence, lawyer style. How long had this been going on? Had I missed signs? Mark had seemed different lately, more attentive actually. He'd been helping more with household chores, being extra affectionate, even suggesting I take more business trips. You work so hard, honey. You deserve some time to focus on your career. I thought he was being supportive. Now those words took on a sinister new meaning. Then Mark stirred and everything changed. Lisa. Mark's voice was groggy, confused. His eyes opened slowly and for a moment he looked at me like he couldn't quite place where he was or why I was standing there. Then reality hit him like a freight train. His eyes went wide and he sat up so quickly that Sarah stirred and mumbled something incoherent. I can explain, he said, the words tumbling out before he was even fully awake. It's funny how that's always the first thing people say when caught in compromising situations, as if those 3 words could somehow undo what I'd just witnessed. You can explain? I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper but loaded with 13 years of marriage, 2 children, and a trust that had just been shattered into a million pieces. You can explain why you're cuddling with our teenage babysitter on our couch? Sarah was awake now, sitting up and looking mortified. Her face was flushed red and she was frantically trying to smooth down her hair. Mrs. Peterson, I'm so sorry, this isn't what it looks like, she stammered, but I held up my hand to stop her. Sarah, go home. Now. My voice was steady, controlled, but inside I was screaming. She gathered her things quickly, her backpack, her phone, her shoes, and practically ran toward the front door. I heard it close softly behind her, and then it was just Mark and me staring at each other across the wreckage of our living room. Mark ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I'd seen him make thousands of times when he was stressed or trying to think through a problem. Lisa, please sit down. Let me explain what's really going on here. What's really going on? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. What's really going on is that I came home early from a business trip to find my husband sleeping with our babysitter. What's really going on is that I'm wondering how long this has been happening and how stupid I've been not to notice. It's not what you think, Mark said, standing up from the couch. He was wearing his favorite pajamas, the ones I'd bought him for Christmas 2 years ago. Somehow that detail made everything worse. I know how this looks, but you have to trust me. There's something I need to tell you, something I should have told you a long time ago. The way he said it made me pause. There was something in his voice, something beyond guilt or panic. It was fear, but not the kind of fear you'd expect from a cheating husband who'd been caught. This was deeper, more primal. What are you talking about, Mark? Mark looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before in our 12 years of marriage. Genuine terror. Not the fear of being caught in an affair, but something much more profound. He walked over to the window and closed the curtains, then checked the front door to make sure it was locked. His movements were deliberate, careful, like someone who was afraid of being watched. Lisa, what I'm about to tell you is going to sound insane, he began, turning back to face me. But I need you to listen to everything before you react, okay? Our lives, all of our lives, depend on it. I wanted to roll my eyes to tell him that nothing he could say would justify what I'd just witnessed, but something in his demeanor stopped me. This wasn't the Mark I knew, the steady, predictable accountant who got excited about tax season and organized our spice rack alphabetically. This was someone else entirely. 3 months ago I was contacted by someone from the government, he continued, his voice barely above a whisper. Not the IRS, not anyone I'd normally deal with. This was different. They knew things about me, about us, about our family that they shouldn't have known. They knew about the birthmark on Emma's shoulder that we've never told anyone about. They knew about the scar on your hip from when you fell off your bike as a kid, the one you've never even told me the story behind. My blood ran cold. The scar he was referring to was something I'd never discussed with anyone, not even my mother. It was from an accident when I was 7, something I'd almost forgotten about myself. They told me that our family had been selected for something called Project Sanctuary, Mark continued. They said that there were threats to our national security that required certain families to participate in a protection program. But not the kind you see in movies. This was different. They needed us to appear completely normal while they monitored potential threats through our household. Mark, what are you talking about? I asked, but even as I said it, pieces of a puzzle I didn't know existed were starting to fit together. The new neighbors who'd moved in 6 months ago but never seemed to actually live in their house. The utility workers who'd been upgrading lines in our neighborhood for weeks. The way Sarah had started asking unusual questions about our daily routines. Sarah isn't just our babysitter, Lisa. She's an agent. She's been placed here to protect our family from something that's coming. And what you saw tonight, we weren't sleeping together. We were both sedated. Sedated. The word came out as barely a whisper. Mark nodded, rolling up his sleeve to show me a small, almost invisible puncture mark on his forearm. Every few weeks they need to update our security protocols, he explained. They use a fast-acting sedative that makes us unconscious for about 4 hours while they sweep the house, update surveillance equipment and brief Sarah on any new threats. We're supposed to wake up with no memory of it, but sometimes the timing gets off. I stared at the tiny mark on his arm, my mind reeling. But why didn't you tell me? Why keep this secret? Because they said if I told you they'd have to relocate us immediately. New identities, new lives, leaving everything behind. The kids would lose their friends, their school, their entire world. I thought I could handle it alone, protect you from having to know. His voice cracked. But seeing the look on your face when you walked in, I realized I was protecting you from the wrong thing. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Mrs. Peterson, we need to talk. Tomorrow 2 p.m. Riverside Park, North Bench. Come alone. Your family's safety depends on your cooperation now that you know. Mark saw me reading and his face went pale. They're always watching, he whispered. I'm so sorry, Lisa. I thought I was keeping you safe, but I've just put you in danger. I looked around our living room, our safe, normal living room, and realized that nothing about our life had been real for months. The couch where I'd found my husband with another woman wasn't the scene of an affair. It was evidence of a conspiracy I couldn't begin to understand. There's more, Mark said quietly. The reason they chose our family, it's because of something you did 15 years ago before we met. Something you probably don't even remember. But they do. And apparently so do the people who want to hurt you. I searched my memory, trying to think of anything from my past that could possibly warrant this level of surveillance and protection. 15 years ago I was fresh out of law school working at a small firm in Boston handling mostly routine cases. Nothing that would attract government attention. But then I remembered the case I'd almost taken but turned down at the last minute. Something about a pharmaceutical company and missing research data. I'd declined because the client seemed unstable, paranoid, talking about government cover-ups and dangerous experiments. The client's name was Dr. Sarah Mitchell. Our babysitter's last name was Mitchell. And tomorrow I would learn that some coincidences aren't coincidences at all.